Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So big happy new year to the team first off. But today I wanted to talk about all the things you need to know for investing in comic books in 2021. And we will be talking about investing here, as opposed to just collecting. Because I think when you're comic book investing, you're trying to bring like another level of intensity to the hobby, I guess. So, maybe a little more strategy and like some specific goals or something like that. So if you are collecting comic books from using that investment perspective, I think there's a couple things to keep in mind here moving into 2021. So first thing to consider, I think, is the era of comic books you're going to be buying or investing in. And, I'm on the record as saying, like, the way I invest in comic books is not the most optimal way. Like, it's not the best way. Really, I think the best way to invest in comic books is buying, 1960s and 1970s big key issues of like these super iconic, strong superhero characters that we've all grown to love. So some of these books would be like An Amazing Fantasy 15, first appearance of Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk 181, first full appearance of Wolverine, X-Men #1, Giant Size X-Men 1, both amazing investment grade books. I got Incredible Hulk #1, Tales of Suspense 39, first Tony Stark. And even like Fantastic Four #1 is one of the hugest keys ever. Like, it's sort of the first Silver Age book, Fantastic Four #1. So, you really just can't go wrong if you're investing in comic books and you're thinking about it almost from like a pure return on investment perspective. I think sticking to those big keys in the 1960s and 1970s is pretty much the way to go. So the way I've kind of gone, I grew up in sort of the late 90s really collecting comic books, and I was really nostalgic for all the big 80s keys and really remember them and lusting after them growing up and not having them because when you're 12, you can't really afford anything. So in the 1980s up to the present era, I really recommend CGC 9.8 comic books if you're thinking about collecting and investing in this era. Because by now, in the 80s and 90s, comic books were so popular, so super printed, not very rare. So it really makes sense to kind of get the most rare, version of a not very rare comic book, the CGC 9.8. So that's the kind of perspective and strategy I've taken to sort of invest in comic books in the 1980s and 1990s, where admittedly the printing just exploded and they're not that rare. So I think depending on the era, you almost can't go wrong. Certainly 60s, 70s, even like the golden age too. You can really talk about the golden age in the same type of way as 60s and 70s books. So, and that era, you almost can't go wrong. Whatever your budget matches, there's a really thriving kind of low-grade CGC market in a lot of those books, so you could check that out maybe. But if you're getting into the 80s and 90s and you have an investment perspective, I really do recommend the CGC 9.8s. And like my philosophy is sort of in the 80s and 90s, I would rather pay $500 for one 9.8 then get two 9.4s and a 9.6 for like $400. Like, save a little bit and get a little more. You just want to go quality first, 100% in the 80s and 90s specifically, because they're really high printed and people knew to keep their books in a bag and board by then. So it really makes sense in that era to stick with CGC 9.8 if you're investing in comic books. So the second thing to really keep in mind and consider here moving into 2021 is the promotional environment for some of the comic books that you might want. So there's probably like a movie or a show or a rumor, you basically, what was it here? Movie shows and rumors really affect the prices of comic books. And you really want to keep that in mind. If you do want a comic book for whatever reason it might be, think about why you want it. Like, did you see a trailer or like maybe you just thought of it yourself, and that's the best way, I think, to come up with some comic book ideas and things like that. But a lot of times, certainly these movies, shows, and rumors and trailers and announcements affect the prices of comic books, and it's temporary too. So, a lot of times on these type of on a book that's really hot, I recommend to wait kind of 4 to 6 months. You'll end up getting a much better price on a lot of these comic books that have a lot of promo on them. So when you're in 2021, if you don't want to be the guy sort of chasing hot books all the time. Some books stay really hot for a really long time, but other ones tend to really cool off. A good example of this, I got an example here. An Amazing Spider-Man #4 in the CGC 9.8. A pretty cool modern comic book. This does sort of happen more in the moderns where like a promo or an announcement or a rumor will heat it up really quick, and then 4 to 6 months later, the price comes back down. That's what happened with Amazing Spider-Man #4 in the CGC 9.8. There was like some Silk Show rumors about 4 to 6 months ago. In the 9.8, this one took off to like 300, 325. And now, 4 to 6 months later, I'm seeing some sell for 200. So you want to be the guy, saving 100 or 125 bucks on Amazing Spider-Man #4, being a little bit patient and buying it at 200, rather than getting excited, getting out there after an announcement and buying it for 325. This whole reason with the promo and the movies and everything, it's really the reason why I like to do the cold list videos, cold comic books at fair prices. Because with the internet and the promo and, there's just these rumors and announcements really affect the prices, especially of the CGC 9.8 books that I really focus on. So, I think doing those cold list videos, thinking about some comics that don't have a lot of promotion that you can buy at a fair price yet are super cool, is, I think, a really great way to think about collecting and investing in comic books. Okay, so 2 things there, I think, to really focus on, the era of what you're going to invest in and the promotional environment for the books that you're investing in so you can get a good price for them. So a couple takeaways here, and I do have 4 takeaways, just quick ones here. First takeaway, if you're looking to invest in comics in 2021, is to stick with iconic brands and strong heroes that we all kind of know and love. Especially if you're investing, there's a sort of spectrum, and we'll maybe get into a spectrum of investor and collector, but if you're thinking about it from a pure investor perspective, I think it's really important to stay with like big iconic heroes. You don't even have to worry about speculating in this obscure hero or this obscure villain. Like, if you're just thinking specifically from a pure return on investment perspective, you just stick with the big iconic heroes, in my opinion. So Spider-Man, Wolverine, Batman, X-Men, Star Wars, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, to a lesser extent, maybe like Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Spawn, I would even throw in there in the sort of modern age. Super iconic, all those big key, with those characters and big keys of those characters, you almost can't go wrong. So that's the first takeaway, sticking with those big iconic heroes. Second takeaway, so the best era to collect comic books, I think, is the 60s and 70s of those big keys. And in the 1980s to present, I do recommend CGC 9.8 comic books if you're coming at it from an investment perspective. A third takeaway here is movies, shows, and rumors do affect the prices of comic books, especially CGC 9.8 comic books. Like, maybe you'll get lucky and in a back bin comic shop in your local shop, you might find a deal on a hot book or something like that. But if you're going on eBay or the internet, a book that has some rumors and announcements about it are almost always going to be super expensive, and it's almost impossible to get a good deal on them. So be aware of that. That's the third takeaway there. And a fourth takeaway is a bit of an open-ended question that I was just interested in and reflecting on. Is, when you're investing in comic books, do you buy what you love? Because I do. I buy what I love. That's why I don't invest in comic books the best way. Otherwise, I would just be buying like Amazing Fantasy 15s as much as I could, or, some of those really iconic books. If you're coming at it from that pure investment perspective, you maybe don't want to buy what you love, to be honest. Like, you want to be emotionless, think about just the return on investment pretty much, and I think when you're thinking about that, those, big 60s and 70s books are going to be the ones to go after. So, for me, this makes me think about that spectrum of investor, return on investment, 100% investor, or a collector. I love art. I love the cover. The cover just was cool, so I bought it. That's the other end of the spectrum. I'm kind of right in the middle, to be honest. Yeah, I buy the books that I'm nostalgic for in the 80s and 90s, so I do buy what I love like a collector. But, I do think buying the CGC 9.8s is probably the best thing you can do in the era that I collect in from an investment perspective. So I'm sort of a little bit of both, but you might be a pure investor, or maybe you're more of a collector. So yeah, just something to think about, because you do hear, and it's really good advice, I think, a lot, is, buy what you love, because you got to have these things, you got to sort of enjoy having them, and when you take them out and look at them, you just got to be like, wow, awesome, and have those good feelings. Like, you want to have that when you're collecting, for sure. But if you're that, the 5 or 10% of people out there that are just into it for the 100% return on investment, really serious about investing in comic books, you probably don't want to buy what you love. You just want to get your hands on as many like Amazing Fantasy 15s and Hulk 181s and Giant Size X-Men #1s and Tales of Suspense 39, Fantastic Four #1, First Thor. There's just so many books. First Groot, and that's just on the Marvel side of things. So and I thought that was interesting because I'm really always ready to say, buy what you love. Absolutely, that's great advice. But if you're thinking about it from a pure investment perspective, you probably don't want to buy what you love. Just stick with those amazing books. Okay, and for everyone out there, it's going to be different for everyone. I'm kind of in the middle on that collector-investor spectrum. I think that's a good way to sort of think about it. A lot of people might be more on the collector end where, you like reading them and you're into New Comic Book Day more. That's more of a collector, I would say, where, as an investor, you're probably like, rather than spend $100 on New Comic Book Day, I'm just going to take that 100 and save it and buy an Incredible Hulk #1 and, CGC 2 or something like that. Would be maybe a quick example. Okay, but I wanted to do a video here of some of the things that I think everyone should know if you're investing in comic books moving into 2021. And we did a video at the beginning of last year that did pretty well. So I think definitely it's probably worth it, maybe every 3 months to do a video like this and just remind people, like, just the sort of basic perspective of and a basic strategy that you can sort of have your own framework around this strategy, but for investing in comic books. And it's going to depend kind of where you end on that investor collector spectrum, I think. Okay, so some things to think about there. Thanks so much for watching today. Just wanted to hash out some tips for early 2021 here. If you haven't already, though, I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. I'd love to have you on our comic book collecting and comic book investing team. Hit the bell for all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter as well. All the links in the description below. But thanks so much for watching. As always, really appreciate the support. And Happy New Year to the whole team out there. Hope everyone has a great 2021. And thanks again for watching, though, and I'll see you on the next one.